Hello Year 10, it's Mr. Godman here and I'm going to be taking your history lesson today. And in this lesson we're going to look at the first big crisis between the superpowers in Berlin in 1948. As always, I'd like you to get yourself set up for the lesson. You need your history workbook, a pen, maybe some spare paper, and I want you to put away any distractions like mobile phones. Pause now if you need to and get yourself ready. Press play when you're ready to go. So, first of all, you'll do now. This is activity 4.1 in your workbook. Last lesson, we were looking at the Soviet reaction to Truman's containment policy, and you have 5 recall questions here to have a go at. As always, I'd like you to do this without looking at your notes or your knowledge organisers, because we're trying to improve your recall. Press pause, have a go at the questions, and when you're ready, hit play again. And here are the answers. As usual, I'd like you to mark your own, and if you get one wrong, can you put the correct answer, preferably in a different colour pen. Don't forget to add up your score out of 5 at the end. Pause now, and when you're done, hit play. So over the last couple of lessons, we've been looking at building rivalry and tension between the superpowers after 1947. And we've seen how both superpowers were starting to compete for influence in Europe. Today, we'll look at how that competition spills over into a crisis, and that crisis happens in Berlin between 1948 and 1949. Today, we'll revise the division of Germany and Berlin at the Potsdam Conference. We'll look at why cooperation between the Allies broke down over the issue of Germany, and we'll look at why Stalin began to blockade the western sectors of Berlin in June 1948. As always, let's update our knowledge organisers first. We're looking at theme 2, the development of the Cold War. And we'll see one key event today in our lesson. That's event 18 on your timeline. Pause now, update your knowledge organiser, and hit play when you're ready to move forward. So here's your starter task, activity 4.2 in your workbook. Today, your first clue about the crisis in Berlin comes from an American political cartoon drawn in 1948. It's all about the first Berlin crisis. I want you to look at the cartoon really closely. What can you see, and what do you think the crisis was? You're going to need to pause and think about that, studying the cartoon carefully and writing down your ideas. When you're done, hit play and we'll move forward. So let's have a look at some good answers to that question. Firstly, I'm sure you noticed this fierce-looking bear in Soviet military uniform. He represents the Soviet Union. I hope you also spotted the city of Berlin in Germany, and you can see the British, American and French flags flying there. This represents the Western Allies sectors of the city. And you should also have spotted that the bear's arms are surrounding the city. Remember, Berlin was in the middle of the Soviet zone of Germany. And it looks like this bear might be about to stop supplies coming into the city. We call that a blockade. And so this cartoon is all about the first Berlin crisis. Stalin blockaded Berlin in order to force the Western Allies to give up their sectors and bring the whole city under Soviet control. That's what we're going to look at today. Now, I want you to pause before we go any further and write down an idea that you missed. Now it's time to introduce some new knowledge. And today we're going to focus on the causes of the First Berlin Crisis. Now we need to do a little recap here. I hope that you'll remember, back at the Potsdam Conference in 1945, the leaders of the Grand Alliance took some very big decisions about Germany and Berlin. They agreed that once the war was over, both Germany and Berlin would be temporarily divided. Germany would be divided into 4 zones. Each zone would be run by one of the occupying powers. That's Britain, France, the USA, and the Soviet Union. The same was true of the city of Berlin, which was also divided in a similar manner. It was divided into 4 sectors, each one occupied by one of the occupying powers. Now, there are 2 very important points that I want you to note and remember here. The first one is this. Notice, Berlin was in the Soviet zone of Germany. It was surrounded by Soviet-controlled territory. And that meant that the Western Allies had to cross the Soviet zone in order to access their sectors of Berlin. And that's going to be very, very important for us in this lesson. Now, after Germany was beaten in World War II, the 4 occupying powers set up an organisation called the Allied Control Commission, or ACC, where they met to take decisions about Germany together. However, cooperation didn't last, and they soon disagreed. The Western Allies, the USA, Britain, and France, were impatient to rebuild Germany's economy. They wanted Germany to become a wealthy, capitalist country again. But the Soviets wanted to continue stripping reparations from Germany in the form of money, food, technology, and equipment. And cooperation between the Allies soon broke down, so that in 1948, the Soviets stormed out of the ACC. With the Soviets gone, the Western Allies went ahead with their plans to rebuild Germany. And they made 3 big changes. Firstly, the Western Allies combined their zones of Germany into 1 unit. This unit was called Trizonia, tri meaning 3. They did the same in Berlin, merging their sectors to make 1 unit. And thirdly, the Allies announced plans to introduce a new currency which would circulate in Trizonia and in their sectors of Berlin. This new currency was called the Deutschmark, and it was hoped that the new currency would lead to the development of Germany's economy. Germany would be back on its feet again. Now, to the Soviets, this looked alarming. The Western Allies appeared to be creating a strong capitalist Germany just on the edge of the Soviet buffer zone in Europe. Stalin saw this as a threat to Soviet interests. So he decided to challenge the Western Allies, and Berlin was his target. And he picked Berlin because it was vulnerable. It was surrounded by Soviet territory. Remember, Berlin was in the heart of the Soviet zone. So Stalin blockaded Berlin by cutting off all road and rail routes to the city. This stopped the Western Allies from bringing vital supplies to their sectors of Berlin. Very soon, the Western Allies' sectors of Berlin began to suffer shortages of electricity, gas, and other vital resources. And now you're ready to do your main activity on the Berlin blockade, which is activity 4.3 in your workbook. As always, it's important that you read carefully before you do the activity. Then, I want you to summarise how Germany and Berlin changed between 1945 and 1948. I'd like you to define some key terms in your own words. And then you have 5 questions that I'd like you to answer in your own words. And I'm looking for more than just a couple of bullet points there. I'd like you to try and do that in full sentences. Well done in today's lesson. And if you'd like to take this a little bit further, you could carry out some research of your own into the Berlin blockade. See if you can find out what sorts of problems it caused for people living in the western sectors of Berlin. That brings us to the end of today's lesson. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which you can do by clicking the link here. Remember, there are plenty more Cold War videos on our channel to develop your knowledge further. And I'll look forward to teaching you more about the First Berlin Crisis next lesson.